So there are stories in this landscape.
So this valley is really unique in that you can look out almost every angle and it looks like what it did 12,000 years ago.
The history of the San Luis Valley is one of the great unknowns of Colorado. Only recently have archaeologists begun to understand the stories in this valley. We're here in a part of the valley that's particularly poorly known.
This project's really unique in that it's bringing together multiple institutions and organizations, the BLM, the Rio Grande Natural Area, the Sangre de Cristo National Heritage Area, a Paleocultural Research Group, and the state of Colorado and the Office of the State Archaeologist.
Our project involves several different phases. We're surveying ground that's never been looked at before. We want to learn something about what's out there on the landscape. They're documenting rock art sites. They're documenting ancient hunting camps. They're documenting homesteads. They're documenting irrigation works for some early settlers who came to farm this land. And unless we document these, unless we understand what's on the ground, we can't talk about the history and we can't preserve that history.
So our work down here right now is to really heighten awareness about the important cultural resources, especially along the Rio Grande. There's not a lot of places on Earth where you can look out and you can see through the eyes of the Paleo-Indian, the bison hunter. You can see through the eyes of the archaic hunter-gatherer. You can see through the eyes of the old Spanish trader going along the old Spanish trail. It's a whole different experience to be able to feel that history in that space.
The most rewarding thing about fieldwork for me really is being outside all summer, to come out and really get a better sense of where people were and where everything's coming from in the setting that it was like probably when people were here in the past. It's probably the coolest part for me. Today we're out here re-recording a site that was documented in the 80s. Sites can be affected by erosion over time. Sometimes the process of recording a site or what it all means changes. So we want to come back, get a better idea of what it looks like now, see if there's anything new that we can add to the research that'll teach us a little bit more about this area or the site. We'll try and preserve it and record it while we can.
Very often when we're just doing survey, what we find is on the surface, and what really makes a site have more potential for research is if we can find something buried that is actually intact where people would have left it. This really is where people left it. I mean, that's exciting to know that that really is. Someone used it, left it there, and it stayed there.
So part of this story is understanding not only who was on the landscape, but when were they on the landscape, and we can do that by seeing diagnostic artifacts like projectile points, arrow points, or spear points. And that really tells part of the story of how long people have been in this part of the valley. The history spans at least 11,000, 12,000 years down in this area, and so we're trying to fill in some of those gaps to see when people were here, and not only when were they here, but what were they doing and kind of why were they here.
There's stories in the rock art which the people which picked this or designed that wanted to tell us something, but what they really thought at that time, we don't know.
To visit the valley is to step back into history. Folks who come to this valley can experience the whole history of humans in North America, from the earliest Paleo-Indian hunters, the first big game hunters that came to this landscape, all the way up into 19th century farmers and settlers who fought to make a living here. So to come to this place, to come to the Rio Grande and see this landscape is to experience history.